If you believe these stories must be remembered, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and help keep history alive. In the early years of World War II, Rome was a city wrapped in silence. A city where every whisper could be overheard and every footstep might belong to an informant. By 1940, the Axis powers cast a long shadow across Europe. France had fallen, London burned at night, and in the heart of fascist Italy sat an island of neutrality, the Vatican. Yet neutrality did not mean safety. German diplomats, Abwehr officers, and Gestapo operatives moved through Rome like ghosts of their own, drinking coffee in Roman cafes while quietly compiling lists of suspects, of informants, of future targets. Inside the Vatican's walls, Pope Pius XII walked a razor's edge. Publicly, the Holy See maintained diplomatic caution. Privately, it was inundated with pleas for help from Jews, political dissidents, Allied prisoners, and Italian civilians. The Vatican became both a sanctuary and a pressure chamber. Every day brought new dangers as Mussolini strengthened his alliance with Hitler, and German influence seeped deeper into Italians' military and intelligence structures. It was during this growing darkness that rumors began to spread among Allied intelligence circles about an unnamed figure inside the Vatican who opposed the Axis not with weapons, but with information. A man known only by his codename, the Ghost. He was described as a modest priest with unremarkable features, someone easily overlooked in the corridors of the Vatican museums or among monks distributing bread to the poor. Yet behind that humble appearance was a mind trained to observe, to listen, and most importantly, to remain unseen. His work began quietly. He noticed German diplomats visiting certain cardinals. He overheard remarks during charity visits to the German college, and he kept track of transport orders whispered by Italian officers who mistakenly believed a priest incapable of espionage. Each detail seemed insignificant alone, but together they formed patterns that revealed movements of German divisions, diplomatic strategies, and shifting loyalties within Italy's government. By late 1940, he initiated his first transfer of intelligence. Hidden inside a sealed letter addressed to a British charity organization was a coded note describing unusual German communications activity in Rome. The Vatican mail was rarely searched, one of the few remaining safe channels in Axis Europe. That message reached British SIS in neutral Portugal, confirming that someone inside the Holy City was feeding them information with astonishing precision. As German presence in Rome tightened through 1941, the Abwehr increased surveillance around monasteries. The Gestapo embedded informants inside Catholic charity groups. Even some within the Vatican suspected that Allied intelligence had penetrated the Holy See. Still, the Ghost continued to operate, gathering intelligence from confessionals, diplomatic receptions, clerical exchanges, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. No one knew his real name. No one could trace his steps. But by the end of 1941, Allied analysts had given him a new label: the most valuable unknown asset in Rome. By early 1942, Rome had become a crossroads of intelligence, suspicion, and fear. German pressure intensified after setbacks in North Africa, and Mussolini's regime tightened its grip. Curfews grew stricter. Patrols doubled, and the Vatican, though still neutral, was now encircled by a city where every whisper risked betrayal. Inside this tightening vice, the ghost understood he could no longer operate alone. Information was multiplying faster than a single man could process. German troop rotations through Italy, shifts in the Abwehr command in Rome, transport orders for Jewish deportations, and requests from resistance contacts across the city all converged at his feet. If he wanted to continue, he needed allies, carefully chosen, absolutely loyal, and invisible to everyone else.
His first recruit was a young Jesuit archivist, Father Leone, a man with an extraordinary memory and a calm temperament. Leone had access to diplomatic files and communication logs from embassies requesting Vatican mediation. Officially, he catalogued documents. Unofficially, he committed them to memory before returning them to their shelves. Every week, during evening prayers when the corridors emptied, Leone passed his recollections to the ghost, encoded in psalm references and liturgical notes. To outsiders, their exchanges looked like nothing more than routine theological conversation. The second member of the network was unexpected, a nun. Sister Agnès worked at a church-run soup kitchen near the Tiber, a place often visited by soldiers and German guards seeking a hot meal. Soldiers gossiped when fed about deployments, rumors, equipment shortages, and frustrations. Agnès listened quietly. At night, she walked across the river to deliver these fragments to a small monastery that doubled as a safe house for the ghost's growing operations.
The third and most dangerous addition was a layman, Matteo Rinaldi, a former telegraph operator dismissed for subtle anti-fascist remarks. Through his old contacts in the Italian postal service, Matteo gained access to undelivered diplomatic mail and intercepted messages. For the ghost, Matteo became the lifeline to decoding German activity within Rome, especially those communications disguised as mundane commercial telegrams. The ghost forged this disparate trio into a network with clear rules: no direct contact between members, no written notes, and no involvement of Vatican officials beyond those explicitly trusted. Every piece of intelligence flowed through the ghost, who compiled, filtered, and disguised it before transmitting it abroad through British intermediaries in neutral Lisbon and the Swiss legation in Rome. By mid-1942, the network identified critical German buildups in southern Italy and revealed increasing friction between Italian and German command structures. These insights reached Allied headquarters weeks before traditional intelligence channels confirmed them. Analysts began realizing something unprecedented. The Vatican, of all places, had become an unintentional intelligence hub. But success brought danger. The Abwehr noted irregularities in diplomatic communication patterns. The Gestapo suspected that someone inside the Holy City was leaking information to the Allies. New surveillance teams appeared in Rome. Checkpoints extended closer to the Vatican borders. Some German officers questioned why priests seemed so well informed about military matters. The ghost understood the new reality. The network he built was no longer merely gathering intelligence. It had become the Axis unseen enemy, one they were now determined to find. The Vatican network had grown from whispered confessions into a machine of covert communication. Coded letters, rerouted diplomatic pouches, and microfilm stitched inside cassocks. But every system, no matter how carefully built, eventually strains under pressure. And in Nazi-occupied Europe, pressure was everywhere. The first cracks appeared quietly. In early 1943, one of the couriers, a young seminarian from Florence named Matteo Serra, failed to return from a routine drop. At first, the priest believed Matteo had simply been delayed, but then rumors slipped through the clergy grapevine. The Gestapo had begun tailing a church youth seen near a diplomatic office. 2 days later, Matteo's name appeared on an internal German list of persons of interest. The net was tightening.
The priest understood immediately what this meant. His operation was no longer invisible. Someone had talked, or someone had been seen. And in the world of intelligence, it never mattered which. The result was the same: exposure. He had to adapt, fast. The Vatican's marble corridors, usually echoing with footsteps of diplomats and visiting clergy, now felt like hunting grounds. The priest changed his routes hourly, using old pilgrimage tunnels beneath Rome to move between safe houses. Sacred objects became hiding places, hollowed-out prayer books wrapped in leather, reliquaries sealed with microfilm, Eucharistic wine crates double-lined to transport coded messages. But the enemy was patient.
The Gestapo intensified surveillance around the Apostolic Palace. Abwehr officers, disguised as German pilgrims, attended masses, watching for unusual movement. Priests disappeared in the night. Monks were questioned, sometimes beaten. Every confession the priest heard now carried 2 layers: the sins of the penitent, and the fear that someone might be listening on the other side of the wooden lattice. The pressure inside the network became unbearable. Silence replaced conversation. Eyes lingered too long on doorways. Even allies seemed like shadows that could not be trusted. And then came the moment when everything nearly collapsed.
One evening, as he prepared to destroy a stack of compromised documents, the priest received a sealed envelope from a trusted monk in the Roman Curia. Inside was a fragment of intelligence smuggled from a German staff car stationed near the Balkans desk. The report, badly translated and handwritten in haste, described something extraordinary: plans for a major German realignment in the Balkans and the scheduled transfer of several elite divisions from Greece and Yugoslavia. It was the first concrete, timely, and strategically explosive piece of intelligence the priest had held in months.
But it meant something worse. If the Germans suspected such information had been leaked, the Abwehr would tear Rome apart to find the source. Carrying that message was a death sentence. Sending it would expose the last intact channel, and yet withholding it would cost Allied lives, thousands of them. Standing in the flickering candlelight of a quiet chapel, the priest faced the impossible choice that every great spy eventually meets: protect himself or protect the mission.
He chose the mission. Clutching the coded report beneath his cassock, he slipped into the night once more, toward the one surviving courier route that hadn't yet been compromised. A path that led through crypts, cloisters, and the darkest corners of wartime Rome.
The Vatican ghost had never been closer to discovery, and never more essential to the fate of the war.
The Vatican, a sanctuary of faith and centuries of diplomacy, had become an unlikely battlefield of intelligence. For months, the priests' network had maneuvered through the shadows, conveying scraps of information from occupied Europe to Allied hands. But now, in mid-1943, the mission reached its defining moment. The envelope from the Balkans carried more than movement orders. It outlined the German army's plans for troop redeployment and strategic offensives across the Mediterranean. If verified, this intelligence could shift the balance in North Africa, where the Allies were engaged in a desperate struggle for control over Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt. It could prevent catastrophe and save thousands of lives.
The reporting required ingenuity and courage. Standard diplomatic channels were under constant scrutiny. One wrong move, and the entire network would be exposed. The priest turned to the oldest, most reliable pathways in the Vatican: tunnels beneath monasteries, catacombs lined with relics, and cloisters where silence had guarded secrets for centuries. Messages were encoded in Latin hymns, sewn into vestments, and disguised as routine liturgical instructions. Even those who delivered them understood the deadly stakes. They were carrying the fate of nations under their cassocks. Allied intelligence, upon receiving the first decrypted reports, immediately recognized the significance. German divisions intended for Greece and the Balkans were being shifted, leaving North Africa vulnerable. Rommel's forces, which had expected no resistance for weeks, found themselves facing a coordinated, informed opponent. The tide of the Mediterranean theater began to shift.
Back in Rome, the Abwehr began sensing that something had gone wrong. German intelligence officers, frustrated by months of inexplicable leaks, launched thorough investigations across the city. Vatican archives, monasteries, and embassies were searched. Clerics were interrogated, courier routes shadowed, and suspicious eyes turned toward the priest. Each day the net tightened. Each day the Vatican ghost walked a razor's edge between discovery and anonymity. The priest's calm exterior masked constant danger. When he moved between crypts, the faint echo of boots behind him could signal the end. Yet every step was calculated. Every gesture, every whispered word served the mission. He understood that exposure would not just mean his death. It would dismantle the network, render the intelligence useless, and allow the Axis powers to capitalize on strategic openings. Lives hung in the balance, and only secrecy could protect them.
The report finally reached its final Allied destination. Strategists pored over maps, confirmed troop movements, and recalculated entire campaigns. The information confirmed suspicions, corrected errors, and created an unprecedented advantage. In North Africa, this intelligence bought weeks of preparation that would prove decisive in battles like El Alamein and subsequent Mediterranean operations. The war, as it turned out, was subtly being rewritten by a priest moving unseen beneath the walls of Rome. And then, as silently as he had operated for years, he vanished. The Vatican ghost disappeared into a maze of crypts and safe houses, leaving no trace. Abwehr officers scoured the city for months, never discovering his true identity. In doing so, he preserved the network, the information flow, and, most importantly, his own life. The Vatican had remained neutral in politics, but in those hidden corridors, one man had rewritten strategy. Through courage, intellect, and faith, a shadow had moved behind the Axis lines, and in doing so, changed the course of the war.
The war ended, but the shadows in which the Vatican ghost had moved did not vanish. His contributions, immense yet invisible, remained unrecognized for decades. The priest who risked everything to deliver critical intelligence during World War II vanished from history in the immediate aftermath, leaving behind only whispers, rumors, and fragments of documents hidden in the Vatican archives. Some believed he fled to Spain, adopting a new identity in a small, quiet town far from prying eyes. Others speculated he retreated into a monastery, devoting his remaining years to prayer and secrecy, refusing to ever reveal the role he had played in shaping the war. Even his closest allies within the Allied intelligence network never knew his true name. He had become a ghost in every sense, a silent figure whose work had altered the course of nations, but who would not seek fame or reward.
Historians first began to piece together the Vatican ghost story in the 1970s and 80s as declassified Allied reports and Vatican documents surfaced. Accounts of an anonymous priest transmitting critical intelligence who had evaded detection by the Abwehr despite relentless searches gradually formed a coherent narrative. Scholars confirmed that the intelligence he provided enabled the Allies to preempt German troop movements in the Balkans, reinforce North African operations, and protect countless lives. The ripple effects of his work had been profound, influencing battles, campaigns, and ultimately the outcome of the war in Europe. The Vatican ghost's legacy, however, is more than strategic. He represents a rare convergence of courage, intellect, and faith. While generals, spies, and soldiers risked life and limb on the battlefield, this solitary figure operated in secrecy, wielding the power of information and subtlety. His story illustrates that wars are not only won by armies and weapons, but also by the quiet, often invisible acts of those who dare to challenge danger in the shadows. To this day, his true identity remains unknown, and he is remembered by historians simply as the Vatican ghost. His tale is a testament to the profound impact one person can have when they act with conviction and precision, even when recognition was never the goal. By remaining hidden, he preserved the very network that made him effective, ensuring that intelligence continued to flow to Allied command. In reflecting on his actions, one understands the delicate balance of secrecy, bravery, and morality that defines espionage. The Vatican ghost did not seek glory. He sought to save lives, protect nations, and influence the trajectory of history without leaving himself exposed. It is this combination of selflessness and genius that elevates his story above ordinary tales of wartime intrigue. Though the war ended decades ago, the legacy of the Vatican ghost endures.
Each revelation of his deeds reminds us that behind the grand campaigns and battles, countless unsung heroes shaped the course of events. Their courage, ingenuity, and dedication altered history in ways that might never be fully measured, but their impact resonates quietly, powerfully, and eternally.